Smack in the middle of then Senator Barack Obama's quest for the Democratic presidential nomination, a recording service of the Reverend Jeremiah Wright delivering a long 2003 sermon entitled Confusing God and Government, where he said, quote, "No, no, no, not God bless America, God damn America." A firestorm ensued because Obama and his wife were parishioners in his church, were married by him, had their daughters baptized by him. Obama stopped going to his church and was compelled to deliver one of the best speeches in American politics and the best speech ever on race. Obama did all of this to save his high-flying campaign from crashing to the ground, a campaign that led him to become the first black person elected president of the United States. My, how things have changed. Today, a former president, who is the current Republican nominee for president, is saying this about Haitian immigrants who've settled in Springfield, Ohio, legally under temporary protected status.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
This is a reprehensible lie. This is racist. This is xenophobic. And this unvarnished racism is being met with a shameful silence from Republicans. The insistence that the lies stop from the mayor of Springfield hasn't moved them, nor have the bomb threats or the school evacuations or the articulated fears of the embattled Haitian community. When Trump was asked about it yesterday at a campaign rally masquerading as a press conference in Los Angeles, he doubled down and said that his long-promised mass deportation in American history would start in Springfield. Explaining why Trump is willfully lying, Greg Sargent of the New Republic wrote on social media, quote, "It's an open assertion of the power to lie with impunity about immigrants as a prelude to bloody removals of millions." Mass deportation is a priority of Project 2025, the 900-page blueprint of Trump's dystopian vision of for America. And Trump is dehumanizing his intended targets to get the political and social buy-in he would need to implement something so heinous. Vice President Harris and Democrats have been raising the alarm on Project 2025 for months now, even as Trump tries to distance himself from it. She's taking her campaign to redder districts in the hopes of gaining the support of Republicans who can't stomach another Trump term. Harris went into the debate with momentum and came out of the debate with some national polls showing her ahead, albeit within the margin of error. But those polls show a stubborn and frightening reality. Despite his reprehensible lies about Springfield and other issues, nearly half the country is buying what he's selling. And defying that reality is the challenge for my leadoff guest. Earlier, I had the chance to speak with Keisha Lance Bottoms, senior advisor to the Harris-Walz campaign and former mayor of Atlanta. Keisha Lance Bottoms, thank you for coming to the Saturday show.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let me get your thoughts on Donald Trump doubling down on the lie about Springfield, Ohio, and the Haitian immigrants, quote unquote, eating the pets.
No, Jonathan, it's really disappointing that the hatred that Donald Trump seems to show on a daily basis is being normalized. And unfortunately, we're not surprised when he says outlandish things. And my heart just goes out to that community. I read a story today about the woman who posted something on Facebook, and she apparently is mortified that it's taken on its life of its own. But it's a reminder for all of us that we have to be careful when we stereotype, when we make assumptions, when we post things, because there's so many waiting to capitalize on this hatred. And the thought that this man is polling neck and neck with Vice President Kamala Harris should be a wake-up call to us all, because even with the hatred that he's spewing, this is still a tight race.
Right, and I mentioned that in my opening comments. It's just sort of stunning to me that given everything that we know and that we've seen, especially out of that debate, that this race is essentially tied. But you know what's something else that I find startling, Madam Mayor? The silence from the Republican Party over this. That, you know, one way to stop this is for responsible leaders to step forward and say, this is wrong, this is not right, this isn't who we are, let's move on. But they're not doing it. Why don't you think they're doing it?
No, and I think that's the question that we all find ourselves asking ourselves, because they walk amongst us, right? We have coworkers, we have neighbors who are registered Republicans, and yet and still people don't see the danger that Donald Trump is to this country. So we have to ask ourselves, what is it that we are missing? Well, I can tell you, we can't make assumptions about who supports Donald Trump. I've sat in the hair salon and I've heard my hairstylist say that he really wasn't that bad. I've heard people in my community say, oh, you know, I don't know who I'm going to vote for. And I think what he has done, I always say a broken clock is right twice a day. He's been speaking to people, especially via social media, for the past 4 years. And so he, in many ways, has capitalized on being this marketing genius, and he has normalized his behavior. He's made people feel so disappointed in politics in general that they are willing to stay home. So we can't put it all in the laps of Republicans. We got to make sure that we are turning out our base, that we are reminding people what a danger this man was to our country and what a danger he's already told us he will be if he's reelected.
Now, to your point about Donald Trump speaking to people, one thing that I found very interesting, and it was brought to my attention, and this is why I reached out to you, your son, your black young son, has been getting mail from the Donald Trump campaign, several pieces of mail, sometimes in one day. We see them here on the screen, basically asking him for his vote. What do you think, Donald Trump? Do you think these mailers are going to have impact on your son or on your son's friends?
Well, thankfully, my son doesn't check the mail. I do. But what it does say to me is that Donald Trump's not taking anyone for granted. It was my son who told me 2.5 years ago that the Democratic Party had a problem with young African-American men. This was long before it was showing up in the polling. So when he tells me that we have a problem, I now listen. And what it says to me is not only has he been flooding his social media feed, he's been flooding a lot of people's social media feeds, because I've asked other people who have children around the same age as mine, are they getting these mailers? Are their kids getting targeted on social media? And the answer is yes. But he's flooding their social media feed. He's sending it in the mailbox. And again, he's normalizing his behavior. So what I would say to anyone who cares about this country, not to take for granted that just because someone looks like you, because someone lives like you, that Donald Trump is not talking to them, that he's not trying to sway them. And what I say to my son is, even if you are so disgusted that you stay home and don't vote, that's still a win for Donald Trump.
Keisha Lance Bottoms, Senior Advisor to the Harris-Walz campaign, thank you very much for coming to the Saturday Show. And joining me now, Congressman Jerry Connolly of Virginia, member of the Foreign Affairs Committee and senior member of the House Oversight Committee. Congressman, welcome back to the Saturday Show. So we're seeing this anti-immigrant rhetoric flowing from the presidential campaign trail into the halls of Congress. Speaker Johnson had to remove a 6-month CR because it had attached to it the SAVE Act, which had, among other things, requiring people to show proof of citizenship, registering to vote. But Democrats weren't going to vote for it. But then Republicans were also against it. Can you talk about what is going on Capitol Hill? And do you think we're going to end up with a government shutdown?
I don't think we're going to end up with a government shutdown, because it's in no one's interest to do that. We only have 2 weeks left in this session before the election, and a shutdown, I think, would be devastating to Republican prospects, and they know that. But I do think what you're witnessing, both at the presidential level and in the halls of Congress, is the deliberate demonization of immigrant populations for political gain. And it is hate-mongering, fear-mongering. It's a sad old playbook in American history, and it's counterproductive in terms of our needs today.
Why is Speaker Johnson going along with this? Because by pushing the SAVE Act and other things, I mean, he's helping to perpetuate this. I hope you're right that there isn't going to be a government shutdown. But what responsibility does Speaker Johnson have in all of this and what you were just saying?
I think he has a large responsibility in terms of moral leadership, and I think he's failing that. He is pandering to the far-right elements of his own party to save his own neck. Remember, it was over the issue of a clean funding bill for the government that toppled Kevin McCarthy. Mike Johnson learned from that. So pandering to the right might save his neck because he, after all, has to face his own caucus to get reelected as Speaker or Speaker nominee when we return in November and December.
Assuming Republicans hold the majority to be Speaker. Let's switch gears on something else involving the Speaker, because in response to the Department of Homeland Security designating January 6th, the January 6th certification of the presidential results, a national special security event, the Speaker said, quote, "It sounds like politics to me." Let's keep in mind, and as you well know, he was an architect of correct me if I'm wrong, the Stop the Steal movement in the Capitol. Sounds like politics to me.
He actually litigated the whole issue of the certification and the legitimacy of President Biden's clear win 4 years ago. I think that's rhetoric that is very dangerous. I was on the floor of the House on January 6th, and I saw that crowd. I was there minutes before Ashley Babbitt was, in fact, shot, trying to get into the House floor. And it was a very, very grave and dangerous moment. For him to play politics with that is just, to me, reprehensible. Shame on him.
You are a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. A big thing happened yesterday that hasn't gotten a whole lot of attention, and that is the new British Prime Minister had a meeting with President Biden where the agenda item number one was Ukraine. Front page story of the New York Times was about how Ukraine wants the United States to grant permission to use longer-range missiles to attack inside Russia. The British want to do it. Europeans want to do it. The new British PM, Starmer, came to Washington to meet with the president to say, can you just say that this is good? Can you give us any update, any intel on how that meeting went and how close the Biden administration is to saying to the British, yeah, go ahead and give them your weapons, and then saying American weapons can be used too?
I think you're absolutely right. I think this was actually a very important meeting that kind of got overlooked in other headlines. It's the first sit-down between the new British government and our government. I think there's a lot of compatibility politically and policy-wise between the two teams. The British, among other allies, as you note, in NATO, believe that we have to take the handcuffs off the Ukrainians and in allowing them to use weapons we provide to respond to Russian aggression. There are no handcuffs on the Russians, but there are very